Welcome to Reclaiming Me, a trauma-informed podcast helping women with complex PTSD heal the lasting impact of childhood attachment wounds from parents and caregivers, so you can finally release people-pleasing and perfectionism and learn to trust in relationships, beginning with the one you have with yourself. I'm your host, Cindy Payne, therapist, trauma specialist, and a woman who has walked this path both personally and professionally.
Hi, and welcome back to Reclaiming Me. Earlier this week, we celebrated episode 100, and that is such a big deal. This episode, which aired on Monday, was a full-length episode that was all about grief, reflection, my own personal CPTSD journey, empty nesting, and reclaiming myself. So today I want to offer a midweek checkpoint, which is something shorter, something more active, and something that you can use right now. So we're going to zoom in on a theme that surfaced for me in the 100th episode on grief and overfunctioning and the myth of certainty. Because here's the truth. Sometimes when grief shows up, what we try to do is to control it or to fix it or maybe even slip into overfunctioning patterns, because what we are trying to ultimately accomplish is that feeling of safety. And this pattern is so common in complex post-traumatic stress disorder survivors. But I'm here to share with you that it's not the only way forward. So I'd like to just share a little personal story from my life, which will hopefully shed some light on the pattern that shows up again when we are on the cusp of change. So typically when we're on the cusp of change, there's something that we are letting go, whether that's a relationship, a life transition, a job, and there's grief tied up in that. And what we're stepping into is this unknown possibility. And because we can't see it and make sense of it, what we tend to do is we try to really lean super hard into this idea of certainty, especially for our CPTSD survivors, because again, this is all about pattern recognition. So if we can just overfunction and do all the correct planning, then maybe we can avoid the grief. But that, unfortunately, is not how it seems to go. So the example from my life that popped up when I was reflecting about this empty nester stage that we're about to embark on starts in 2001. And in 2001, just want to set the stage, I was getting ready to graduate from college in May. And my husband and I had a wedding planned in June. So not even a month after college graduation, we got married. And I didn't realize it at the time, but what I know now that I could not see then is that I needed so much certainty in my life in order to feel a sense of safety. And yes, I deeply loved my husband, still do, still going strong. But really, ultimately, the rush to solidify this was all about certainty for me. So I began over planning well before we got married. I did a lot of the over functioning, pulling it all together, making sure that everything was just so. And I overthought the hell out of it. And it was all in an effort to keep my inner world from tipping into chaos. And this was coming again on the tail end of 4 years of undergrad where things had gone overall pretty well. I'd gone to college. I was finishing up my degree. I had my first teaching job lined up. but I had never adulted before. I'd never lived on my own before. I'd never stepped into postgraduate emerging adult world. So yeah, you bet. There was some uncertainty, some anxiety, some fear. I was really aware that I did not want to repeat patterns in my family. My grandmother preached from an early age to get your college degree and be able to support yourself. And I know that she was trying to protect me, but it made me afraid because again, I looked at the instability with my mom and I just really wanted to lock it all down and make sure that I could do everything in my power not to experience pain and risk and uncertainty. So fast forward 25 years later, and we are approaching this empty nesting stage. Our twin boys are graduating high school in just 2 months. And I see how much of my life has been shaped by this myth of certainty. And even in the 100th episode on Monday, I reflected on this, that grief doesn't just appear in these huge losses. It shows up quietly in transitions. It shows up in endings and changes, even the everyday ones. And often my first response is to do more, to fix more, to control more, and to keep the pain at bay. And this is one of those examples in my life where I couldn't be more hopeful and more proud and more excited for our boys to continue to carve their own pathway, but it's painful. And our life as we've known it for the last 25 years is changing. So I want to just shift over into some CPTSD insight and just share again that this is so familiar, this CPTSD pattern of overfunctioning as a coping mechanism. And right now in my life, just because I've been working on it for a long time doesn't mean that it still doesn't show up. I can see examples of hypervigilance, striving, perfectionism. I've been doing a ton of personal work over the last year and a half to 2 years on my perfectionism. So it's a little bit quieter these days, but the hypervigilance and the striving is still very present. So as my boys are making their college plans and finishing up their high school senior year, I am well aware that my role as their mother is going to be changing to more of a consultant role. And so there is this part of me right now that feels a little, okay, a lot on edge. I'm tense. I'm aware. I am noticing. I'm trying to figure out where I fit now and when to push and when to pull, when to step in and support and when just to be quiet and cheer them on. The overfunctioning as a coping mechanism can also, for me, look like doing more to protect myself from feeling grief or uncertainty. And so I shared in Monday's full length episode how I have been nagging. I don't think my kids would disagree. I tend to do a little bit more nagging by reminding them of things, asking them a lot of college-centered questions. Have you filled out this form yet? Have you seen the orientation dates come through in your email? And I realize again that this is coming from me trying to step in and block the feelings of grief that they will be leaving us. And I don't know what that's going to look like. And then finally, believing that if you can control the outcomes, then you'll be safe. So I know that I'm safe. I know that I'm physically safe. I know that I'm emotionally safe right now. But I don't know what that's going to look like in a few months from now when I'm helping them pack up all their stuff and the house is going to be quiet and we won't have the familiar sound of them walking in the door. And so I'm really holding on tightly to this controlling of outcomes right now, even though there's not really much to be done in this moment, but just be and be present and feel. Because here's the thing, safety is felt. Safety is not manufactured. And certainty is the story that we tell ourselves. And overfunctioning, though, feels really helpful in the moment. What it does is it keeps us from processing grief fully. So I invite you, if any of this sounds familiar to you, to take a moment to notice, where might you be overfunctioning in your life right now? Can you identify a person or a situation or maybe both? And what grief are you avoiding by overfunctioning? So in other words, if you stopped overfunctioning, what would you feel? What would you have to hold? And so I want us to shift into a somatic nervous system exercise, just really allowing us to check in with the body, which after all is the place that CPTSD really lives. So I invite you to sit comfortably, feet on the floor, hands resting wherever feels natural, and just inhale slowly, hold, and exhale fully. And now scan your body. Where is tension? Where is tightness or rigidity? If you're like me, some of it resides in the shoulders, the jaw, the stomach, and even my chest. See if you can locate it. And when you can find that tension, ask yourself, where am I overfunctioning to avoid grief or discomfort? And where can I soften, even just a little, right now? So try this. Drop your shoulders, release your jaw, and notice your breath. Even a small shift signals to your nervous system that it is safe to feel in this moment. And I'd like for you to think of one micro reclaiming action. So perhaps it is saying no to something that feels unnecessary in the moment, or taking a break without feeling guilty. Simply noticing the grief rather than pushing it away. And I also want to add a reflection prompt, and this can be done through journaling if you're a pen to paper kind of person, or maybe voice notes. And you can write or speak the answers to these questions aloud. Number 1, what grief am I noticing this week? How has overfunctioning shown up in response to this grief? What small, tangible action could I take to soften, even slightly, in my body or my mind? Because remember, overfunctioning isn't bad. It's a signal. It's your nervous system saying, I need safety. Your grief is valid. Your nervous system is valid. And your need for certainty is also valid. So this midweek checkpoint ties directly to episode 100, because episode 100 on Monday was about reflection and grief and reclaiming yourself and noticing those patterns from CPTSD. Whereas this session is more about zooming in on one particular pattern, overfunctioning, and giving yourself a practical somatic way to shift it. So even 5 minutes of noticing, softening, and reclaiming is real nervous system work. So just to recap for today's mini episode, number 1, overfunctioning is a survival tool, but it's not a substitute for feeling grief. Number 2, certainty is a story that we tell ourselves, but safety is felt and it is not manufactured. And number 3, small moments of noticing and softening even for 5 minutes, add up to profound change. So I invite you one more time to just take a deep breath with me. Inhale, fill up until you can't fill up anymore. And exhale. And let this small pause be a reclaiming of your body, your grief, and your story. And if this mini episode resonated, please consider leaving a review or sharing it with someone who might need this midweek reset. Or you can always send me reflections or questions inspired by your own grief or CPTSD journey. You can find me on my website at cindypayne.com or on Instagram at cindypaynerooted. Your voice really does shape this space and it helps it grow so that we can continue supporting one another in reclaiming our lives. And so I appreciate you being here truly from the bottom of my heart. And I hope you'll join us next Monday for another full-length episode. Thanks, everybody. Take good care.
Thank you for spending this time with me today. I hope you leave feeling a little lighter, a little more grounded, and a little closer to trusting yourself and your inner experience. If this episode resonated with you, please follow or subscribe so future conversations can meet you when they're needed. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, consider sharing this episode with them. That's one of the ways this work reaches the people who need it the most. You can find me on Instagram at cindypaynerooted, and you can also visit me at cindypayne.com, where you'll find all episode links, blog posts, practice updates, and a free people-pleasing style quiz designed to help you notice your patterns with more compassion. And remember, every small step towards healing, self-trust, and presence matters. You are worthy of this journey. Thanks, everyone.